Joe Biden cannot continue to control this country if you have free access to information. It's that simple. Biden certainly is not improving your life. He's not even trying to improve your life. So the best he can do is lie to you and demand that you believe it. But to do that, he needs to make certain that nobody else can talk, because if you were to hear the truth, you might not obey. How is Biden going to pull that off? It's not easy. Well, one option would be to get men with guns to tell you to shut up.
What the hell is Tucker Carlson complaining about now? Men with guns, those sound like militias to me. But either way it goes, that's Tucker Carlson just from Thursday night complaining about what he's now discovered, which is the Department of Homeland Security's Disinformation Governance Board. That does sound scary. The Disinformation Governance Board. As he went through this further, he did also highlight what Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas of the Department of Homeland Security did point out when it came to this program, and he completely misrepresented it right afterwards. Watch.
We have so many different efforts underway to equip local communities, to identify individuals who very well could be descending into violence by reason of ideologies of hate, false narratives, or other disinformation and misinformation propagated on social media and other platforms.
Oh, did you know that? So one of our biggest law enforcement agencies has men with guns around the country doing so many things to stop disinformation and false narratives. Those aren't even lies, they're just deviations from the approved script. Mayorkas told us again that men with guns plan to, quote, identify individuals who could be descending into violence, could be descending. Not people who've committed violence or even been accused of any crime at all. DHS is instead using law enforcement powers to identify and punish people who think the wrong things. That would be opponents of the Biden administration. Is this dystopian fiction? No, it's happening right in front of us. That means that Joe Biden's partisan political enemies are now officially enemies of the state.
You notice how none of that made any sense as far as reality? That was a fiction that he went through that entire time. It was an assumption. Men with guns, he said 3 times just in that little clip, because he wants to bury it in his viewers' minds. Men with guns are coming to get you. Men with guns are coming to get you. Men with guns are coming to get you. What do his type of followers think when they hear that over and over and over again? Regardless of what he showed none of that in that entire diatribe there. Men with guns are coming to get you. They're coming to get you, they're coming to get you. It doesn't make any sense because this is exactly what it is. So a newly formed Disinformation Governance Board announced Wednesday it will immediately begin focusing on misinformation aimed at migrants. A problem that has happened, that has helped to fuel sudden surges at the US southern border in recent years. Human smugglers often spread misinformation around border policies to drum up business. Now, pause for a second. I remember when a lot of conservatives complained about the situation at the border, and they said all of these, and they call them more derogatory names, all these migrants are coming up here because they think the border's wide open. They complain about that and they said we should stop allowing them to think so. And I've always said, I don't think these folks that are traveling from country to country are holding a cell phone watching CNN going, CNN just told me I'm coming to the border. But apparently there is some misinformation because it's from people who are trying to get this to move along. So let's continue on with why they're doing this. So first of all, Republicans should be happy about this aspect of it because it would limit that. But they don't want that. Continuing, last September, for example, confusion about President Biden's immigration policies combined with messages shared widely across the Haitian community on Meta's Facebook and WhatsApp platforms led some of the 14,000 migrants to the border town of Del Rio, Texas, where they set up camp. Some were ultimately expelled and were flown out of the US. Others were chased down by men on horseback and beaten. Okay, the new board will also monitor and prepare for Russian disinformation threats at this year's midterm elections near, and the Kremlin continues an aggressive disinformation campaign around the war in Ukraine. Russia has repeatedly waged misinformation campaigns aimed at US audiences to further divisions around election time and spread conspiracy theories around US COVID-19 vaccines. So here we are with this. We don't need to go to that last part. Let's open it up to you guys now.
Okay, so there's 2 parts to this. One is completely perverting the truth on what is actually happening with the government. The other is stoking potential violence, and that's the super scary part. So there is a new thing called Disinformation Governance Board. What are the things that it is fighting against? The migrant issue that JR pointed out, and if you're a Republican, you want them to tell the Haitians it's not an open border. So do you want it or don't you want it, right? And this is in some ways also Biden trying to appease the right wing. But Biden, stop. All they ever do is twist it against you. Now, there are other issues as well. For example, foreign governments. Okay, I know the Republicans are now obsessed with loving Russia, okay? And that's not even true after the war. A lot of them, according to the polling, have turned around and now support Ukraine. But there is a core group, including Tucker Carlson, that always defends Russia. And they say, oh, Russia, 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 I can't with Russia gay, that's total nonsense. Okay, I know you love it when Russia interferes here. Okay, so then let's say it's not Russia. If you don't fight against disinformation, you say the government is not allowed to fight against disinformation, then Iran can come in here and buy all the media they want. They have plenty of oil money. Venezuela can do the same thing. You just set up an open auction where every foreign government can come in and pour in lie after lie after lie. And you say, no, the government shouldn't be able to fight back. Okay, now guys, does the government lie sometimes? Of course. We call out the government lies under both Republican and Democratic presidents all the time. We were one of the 2 national shows, yes, we're that old, that said, no, the government's lying about the Iraq war. No, Iraq did not attack us on 9/11. It's a goddamn lie. Warrantless wiretapping. We've told you about so many of the government lies. So if this turns into what the Republicans are calling it, because Tucker said it in that segment, the Ministry of Truth, right? Yeah. We'll be the first ones on them. We don't want those goddamn lies. And we've spotted 1,000 of those lies. But this is not that. How do I know that? First of all, they haven't done anything yet. So they're like, oh yeah, men with guns are coming with lies, and they're gonna be, if you disagree with them, they're gonna kill you. They haven't done a goddamn thing yet. And if they lie, then I'm gonna come out here and say, oh no, don't believe that. And they should disband that because it turns out it was BS propaganda. Is the government possible to do that? Of course, BS propaganda from the government. Have you heard of the Pentagon? Okay, yeah. So let alone the CIA, etc. So, but guys, the second part's more important. Jared's right, he said it so many times, as if there are actually men with guns coming to your house, if you're a right winger, and say, well, who do you agree with? You disagree with us? That's it, I've got a gun here, right? And what is that gonna do, especially for right wingers? They're gonna grab their guns. And they're gonna think, if the government official, any government official comes here trying to regulate my opinions, I'm going to kill them.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's even a little darker than that. I think it's even scarier than that, because the clip that he played from Mayorkas was essentially having some sort of stopgap for people who see that their friends or family or someone they know is being radicalized by, say, white nationalist propaganda. Maybe they've joined a militia, maybe they have. He's speaking to men with guns about these so-called men with guns from the government. And I, for one, am actually kind of heartened that there is this board, whatever, Disinformation Governance Board. Maybe that sounds creepier than it should, but at least it's not the FBI, because we know how ham-fisted the FBI has been when it comes to any kind of domestic terror threats, right? Obviously, they love doing entrapment schemes. We see this with Muslim Americans after 9/11, and we even saw that in the kidnapping case of Gretchen Whitmer. A number of those guys were FBI informants. Of course, those guys got off. The Muslims who were entrapped by the FBI, no. They definitely got locked them up because obviously they're Muslim. So, but I think it's actually important you think about it. It's been 4 years. I mean, how many years since Trump was elected, when like the internet went bad and we realized maybe this thing is actually not as good as it once was, and like there's been no protections. So like at least having something that isn't the ham-fisted FBI security state, creating a minimal amount of protections and a little bit of a separation between our extreme security state or nothing, I think is good. So I hold my breath. And of course, I don't want it to just be used against migrants, because of course it's always used against people of color, right?
And so Tucker got obsessed with that phrase, descending into violence, right? So if the government is gonna use it for pre-crime, then I'm gonna agree with them, okay? But so far they haven't done anything, so I don't know if they're gonna use it for that, if they're gonna use it for the right reason, right? So the entrapment that the FBI does is unacceptable, whether it's left wing, right wing, it doesn't matter. Entrapment's outrageous. And by the way, the government for a long time, both at the national level and if you remember the story from New York City at the local level, they've been tracking mosques in the country for decades. They have no information at all that anybody's done anything wrong, that anybody's descending into violence. They're like, it's a mosque. We're just bigots. And so we want to raid their houses of worship and spy on them. They've been doing that this whole time. And the entire time the right wings were like, get a boy, who cares? Pre-crime all the way. Let's investigate that without any evidence at all. Now, the things that they're talking about in descending to violence, the FBI has shared some of that information. And yes, there's white supremacist group, but they're not the only ones. There could be Muslim terrorists. I know for right wing, you have to say Muslim, otherwise they don't care, right? So, but terrorists of any sort that are really deep into their plots, and there's actually evidence, and they've collected arms, and they've got an indication they're about to use the arms. Remember, the FBI doesn't want to go in until then, otherwise they can't convict them, right? Other than it becomes pointless and they can't get the notch on their belt. So there's a real reason for the law enforcement to go in rare cases. And guys, what happens after every school shooting? Everyone, including and most especially the right wing, goes, why didn't they do anything to stop it? And then when you say, hey, let's do something to stop it, they're like, yeah, your men with guns are coming for my opinion.
A new poll comes out every day. The latest one is about 1/3 of the country, almost the great majority of which are Republicans, saying, yeah, it might be time for violence, and violence against the government might be acceptable. And partly because we have a history and culture of violence in America that is unfortunately ingrained in our culture, and the right wing has always talked about how you need your guns to fight against government tyranny. They never quite explain who they'd have to shoot, because guns aren't to hug people, they are literally to shoot things. And in this case, when they talk about government tyranny, the government isn't run by deers or bears, it's run by humans. So they're talking about shooting humans. And the first set of humans they would have to shoot in that scenario are cops and soldiers. US soldiers, US cops. So that's the government tyranny that they would need their guns for. And so let's just be honest about that. Let's be clear about that. Now, having said that, it appears the Democratic Party, in my opinion, is whistling past the graveyard. Unfortunate apt analogy here, or metaphor. And I don't think they have a good sense that the Republicans do not think like us. The Republican leadership is going and talking to Viktor Orban. Trump just endorsed him. Tucker Carlson went and did a week on how, basically it was how to take over a country and destroy its democracy and turn it fascist 101. And he put it on Fox News for a whole week. And Republicans and right-wingers found that to be perfectly normal. Oh, Viktor Orban strangled democracy in his crib in Hungary and now leads an authoritarian government. Let's celebrate that. And Nina, it feels like the people who are launching the Titanic saying that it cannot sink. And whenever you talk to people in the establishment, whether it's media or the Democratic Party, it feels like they say it cannot sink. American institutions are too strong, but never giving any evidence of why they're too strong, but using it mainly as an excuse to not push back against Republicans when they go in this direction. But it's also not easy to know how to push back. So, which leads me to the question of what would Nina do?
Yeah, I mean, this kind of disillusion, and I love how you set the table, is dangerous. And that's what we need everybody to understand, but especially the people who we elected into power. The fact that Republicans are laying all of their cards on the table out in the open for everybody to see. Here's my hand. And elected leaders are not more alarmed is troubling. I want to go to something that Dr. Noam Chomsky about two years ago, he talked about, explaining, what is the state of democracy, not just in the United States of America, but in the world. But a point that he made is that we have democracy in form, but limited in function. And we see that really happening in this country right now. So one of the things that I would do is, number one, confess the sins. I'm not a Catholic, but I understand you go to confessional. We have to be willing to accept the fact that this is the state that we're back in America, because as you laid out, Cenk, this country, the level of violence that was accepted, literally accepted, is absolutely real. We are having this conversation on January the 6th, and there are still people out there pushing the narrative of Donald J. Trump and Bannon and all the rest of these people totally falsehood. So first we got to confess and understand who we are dealing with, and to know that we are indeed in a crossroads. We have to be willing to enhance and advance democracy. And Cenk, bottom line is that what this requires is for leadership, the president, but not just the president solely. And I'm talking about elected leader and activist leader, faith-based leaders, corporate leaders. Yeah, I'm calling them corporate leaders too, to bandy together and to go out into this community, call things what they are, and ask the American people to not let democracy go backwards on our watch. So it goes back to something that John F. Kennedy said, which is ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. And this is a situation, Cenk, where it requires all hands on deck.